Ah yes, the 5 Kage Summit, the peak of power within the world, all gathering into one room to discuss the future of shinobi kind from the ever-emerging threat of Madara Uchiha. There isn't really a doubt in my mind that this arc is the most stacked arc in terms of competitors, with the chapter 457 cover quite literally calling it a gathering of the strongest ninjas. So today, I've pretty much decided to actually rank everyone at this summit, and I'm taking the characters who are in the summit, so I'm not going to be taking Kisame, Killer Bee, Kakashi, Naruto, those characters, right? Just kind of on the basis that they don't really appear in the summit rooms, and yeah, so let's get straight into it. Here are all the characters I will be ranking, beginning with the guards being the Samurai, Akatsuchi, Ao, C, Darui, Tamari, Kankuro, Fu, Torne, Suigetsu, Jugo, Karin, Chojuro, and then the Kage or leaders being Raikage A, Tsuchikage Oniki, Kaze Kage Gara, Mizukage Mei, Mifune, and Danzo, and then Obito and Sasuke. Coming in the 22nd place, it's the random samurai set to guard Mifune and hold order in the summit. This shouldn't really come to anyone's surprise. These samurai act as more as cannon fodder than anything else, with an early Sasuke lackadaisically blowing through several of them at the same time. I mean, if you really want to give them something, then they also get folded by Kimimaro in the war while survives. So yeah, last place goes to the samurai. Ao is a character always deemed as formidable. However, while that may be the case, a case in such an area here is nothing to second glance at, as everyone else here is formidable, and probably more so than Ao. Since, believe it or not, I couldn't find a single reaction feat or power feat for Ao whatsoever, with his only worthy mention being that he uses a Byakugan and Fu can't break the seal that covers his eye layer. However, that's not really a feat for Ao, since neither him nor Mei could also break it, as implied by Mei when she tricks Fu into thinking she could do it. With that being said, 21st place goes to Ao. Following up with number 20, we have another shinobi many people also think is really impressive, probably more so than the likes of Ao, and that's C. C, a Kumo guard, is practically a genjutsu specialist and sensory specialist, yet gets folded and paralyzed and knocked unconscious from a 3 Tomoe genjutsu from Sasuke. Yeah, and while that's not a horrible anti-feat or, anything, as Sasuke has genjutsu that even caught Orochimaru lacking, such as demonic illusion shackling stakes, C is impressive much earlier, where he is shown jumping down alongside the other guards. However, in both instances, every guard kind of does it, so it's probably not a sign of, a crazy feat or anything like that. A few chapters after this, though, we can see him use another genjutsu of his own called Lightning Illusion Flash Pillar, in which it is notably impressive by Jugo, who states it's almost blinding, with Sasuke not worrying all that much as he broke out of it with a 3 Tomoe Sharingan. However, the next sequence, Sasuke is on the ground in a very vulnerable position in which both the Raikage and Darui, move to capitalize and hit him, sort of indicating the superior between C and Darui. Darui also notes more on this later, telling C to go check for the other Sasuke, allies and whatnot, in which Darui just follows up with, "We don't need you." Again, sort of keeping the notion that the Raikage and Darui are the fighters of the group and not C. And he's kind of like the female of the group, not to be misogynistic or anything. Now, Karin over C? Well, yeah, it may sound weird initially, but allow me to elaborate. C's main thing is sensory and genjutsu, hence to why he's always making remarks about the Raikage. But considering his feats aren't really that prevalent, neither are Karin's, but hers are admittedly probably better, with her sensory being far greater than anything he has, with the third databook making note that her chakra is worthy of an Uzumaki title and could be comparable to that of both Nagato and Kushina's respectively. The databook also hails her scientific knowledge and knack for intellect, with it mainly noting her sensory, that's implied to actually be greater than even ocular jutsu. This isn't even heavily inconsistent either, with her being able to perceive and interpret the entire Sasuke versus Danzo fight, and while that obviously doesn't place her relative to them, I mean, Danzo nearly one-shots her in base. However, she could still react and dodge Mei's lava style, or kind of just fall out of the way, albeit barely, but she still does dodge, which is just greater than whatever anyone else below her kind of has. And there could be arguments to place her even higher, as the third data book makes note that her and Suigetsu fight like cats and dogs. However, Karin usually wins. Now, this is more implied to be a gag concept rather than some high-level power scaling. If you do subscribe to this gag being more literal and take it as, Sakura's, angry female gag with Naruto, then by all means, place her one slot above Suigetsu. However, I'm keeping her here at the big 19th. Next up, unironically in 18th, we have Suigetsu. Now, there really is a lot of nuance when trying to accurately place him in any sort of these rankings. Now, many people do believe that Jugo is weaker or probably slower than Suigetsu, but this is probably wrong, considering how Suigetsu is barely able to perceive a holding back V1 Raikage, stating that he's fast, when someone like Jugo straight up reacts to him point blank and does better against Darui, who other which when battling Suigetsu is more of just playing defensive and parrying Suigetsu off than anything else, with him outright presumably using body flickering and intercepting him in a similar light to how Suigetsu does with the Raikage, who's implied to be relative to Darui. Now, normally, much less, when he's going for a downward strength focused attack, so him being relative to the Raikage is a little weird, but with that, Suigetsu just doesn't really have anything else for physical stats. Again, if you subscribe to Karin being higher based on the data book, then place her here and him at 19th. But regardless, Suigetsu's hydrification is pretty impressive, allowing his arms to not be ripped off by the Raikage, allowing Suigetsu to flow through many blows and attacks, so it definitely could be pretty practical against many of these fighters. But with this, he also has a subsequent weakness to lightning style, so yeah. One above Suigetsu is his ally, Jugo. Now, I want to start off by saying that Jugo and Suigetsu are quite comparable. However, when you look at how Darui parried Suigetsu, Jugo intercepts that Darui in a very similar manner, with him also being able to react to the V1A at a very close range. He also perceives the attacks a little better than C and whatnot. So, yeah, when you look at these speed feats, it just really does hurt the case, because Jugo is also stronger than Suigetsu physically, being one of 3 people to ever utilize partial transformations effectively, granting very large strength buffs, and even having blasts that worried C in regard to if it actually may hurt A. So I know I covered him too in the Suigetsu reaction section, but Jugo is just rightfully 17th. Yo, so excuse me for interrupting this heat, but I just want to ask you guys if you would maybe consider leaving a like or subscribing, as that would help me out greatly, and a lot of effort does go into these videos. I'm literally the only one that makes my videos, so hit that sub button, or don't, I suppose. Anyway, back to the video. Okay, listen, I know, we all like to make fun of Chojuro, and, here and there, but in this case, he really does have some impressive showings, or at least showings that are more impressive than the ones below him. Upon Sasuke entering the discussion room, Mei fires Lava Style, and this Lava Style was shown to be pressing a ribcage to Sano's Sasuke, with Chojuro also being able to jump alongside her for a combo, with him also knowing her commands and then completely slamming this Sasuke through a wall. This was shown to hit Sasuke hard enough for the Susanoo to begin to dissipate in some areas and force him to his knees. The 4th data book also states that his strength is virtually the same as his self-confidence, so when Chojuro is performing his feats, it's right after his confidence is pretty low, especially when hearing that he has to face a man who beat Zabuza. But he does come back with the realization he needs to protect Mei, but still, it's certainly worthy to note that Chojuro can get stronger if he's more confident, and he could be placed higher. Also, by the way, his feat on Sasuke is a very fatigued Sasuke, and Karin notes that he is just so much weaker due to his loss in chakra, and then Zetsu has to heal him, so just keep that in mind. The next 2 basically have no showings whatsoever. This is Temari and Kankuro. These 2 have one showing, and it's their long-range attacks combating Sasuke alongside Darui's Laser Circus, an attack that fires at light speed with the manipulation of his water particles and lightning. So, while this is impressive, it's really hard to assert them anywhere else, but considering they can scale to Darui, who you'll see where he appears later, it sort of makes sense for them to arguably be greater than everyone else below him, if you do just believe that Darui is merely suppressing his laser circuits to enforce a greater combo attack. Then please, by all means, drop Kankuro and Temari at the end of the ranking. Temari should be the superior of the 2 if I had to lean on either of them, as when we see them exit the summit, Temari lands on the ground faster, and she actually is ahead of both Gaara and Kankuro when traveling, and, Tamari's win style, at least in the war arc, which is a few days later, is shown, utilizing it in a casting net, which is capable of blitzing the base third right Kage. The last databook, or databook 5 as some refers to it, claims that her win style is the best in all of Suna, with a picture of the casting net being what's displayed. So if you really want, you could place her far above Gaara's sand and whatnot, but a more consistent line of reasoning would just be to have her here at 14th and Conqueror to follow at 15th. So very similar to the previous two, our 13th and 12th place, Akatsuchi and Kuretsuchi, are virtually featless through this arc, with Akatsuchi only having one showing, and that's him reacting to Mei's lava style alongside Inoki. So if you think there's any sort of relativity to him and Mei's attacks, or even him and his leader Inoki, then this spot is probably a really solid one. In which the war arc in the very early portion, towards the preparation area, both him and Kuretsuchi have some feats, with Kuretsuchi only being able to really catch Kabuto off guard with her quicksand, so she doesn't really have anything else besides that. However, she is shown moving relative to Akatsuchi with, them moving alongside each other and combo attacking together, so place her just unquantifiably below Akatsuchi, who can hold an Inoki who obviously isn't trying. So if you think they both suck, then by all means place them in last, but I'm just trying to be generous here. Also, where is Kuretsuchi for most of the summit? She kind of just doesn't show up. Anyway, whatever. Arriving at our first leader, we have Mifune in 11th place. So I want to firstly say that Mifune is no slouch by any means necessary. Many people bring up how Mifune fought Hanzo and got destroyed. However, this is pretty disingenuous since while yes, he lost, he was still strong enough to force Hanzo to go all out and not have any room to hold back. A prime Hanzo who even had Jiraiya scared decades later after his death, to which even Pain even admitted that the only reason why Hanzo lost to him was due to how he lost his drive and passion for shinobihood or domination, with Mifune himself comparing him to a Blade Run doll. Mifune in this form, though, can't really be scaled to his prime counterpart and henceforth Hanzo, as this Mifune makes many remarks about him continuing to train and sharpening his blade. However, he still was very much relative to the suppressed, dulled Hanzo still, so his training didn't really aid him much. And his best feat is clashing with a 3-Tomoe Sasuke, who has grown much stronger due to his, Susanoo and hatred evolving, which we'll get into later, both making his stats greater, but, this is pretty impressive, and he is implied to be strong as well, just not really as strong as some of the other characters, so yeah, Mifune is 11th place. At number 11, we have Fu. Now, Fu is pretty interesting, as he, along with Torine, has feats at a top contender level in this arc, being against Obito, and many people believe that Obito straight up no-diff them. However, this isn't really the case. Their main interaction on screen begins on the opening chapter of 475. However, before this, at the end of the previous chapter, you'll actually notice that there is a cloud of smoke near Danzo, Fu, and Torine, to which Obito jumps back from, in which both Fu and Torine are in combative stances. This implying that, while albeit briefly, Fu and Torine scrapped with Obito for even longer than what we saw on screen. Then they jump up to combo Obito, and Obito dodges Torine's kunai, which was a decoy, allowing Fu to attempt a mind transfer jutsu on Obito, but for that jutsu to work, you have to be rather still, giving Obito a hard counter advantage, just being able to literally slip through the ground. Then Obito exits the pillar, and Fu swings his sword, covering a greater distance than Obito, using whatever you want to say Obito is doing here. Obito does end up catching his hand, being already in line to catch it, as shown here. Then Obito begins to counterattack, and Torine intercepts Obito's punch. However, then they charge at the same speed, and Obito phases to their counterattack. I would say that Torine should be the superior though, considering he does better than Fu in the bout. However, Fu should still be relative to him, and I know it may seem weird putting Fu this high, even above characters like Mifune and Chojuro, but if you analyze the narrative around these two, they are quite literally Danzo's top soldiers he wanted by his side when he had to meet with the most powerful forces in the world, implying that these two are more than likely the peak of the Konoha Foundation. Most of the other guards, or just Jonin guards, and obviously foundation members and or Anbu members are above that Jonin tier, which is always above the other villages' Jonin, with the exception of Kumogakure, as their military is implied to have trained during the blank period, as remarked by Inoki. During the Konoha Crush, weaker Tokubetsu Jonin like Hayate were able to combat Baki, the San's strongest Jonin. So yeah, Konoha is no joke when it comes to their shinobi. So the narrative for Fu and Torne later being this high shouldn't be inconsistent. Fu is a Yamanaka clan member, meaning that he is another sensory ninja who can also utilize techniques like mind transfer, which would literally work on most people in the summit. I mean, if Fu and Torne tried to combo somebody else, it would have been much harder for them to survive. So yeah, in 10th place we have Fu. Next up, we have Fu's partner, Torne Aburame. Torne, as I mentioned, is demonstrated to be the superior of the two. Torne is able to throw a kunai much faster than Obito can punch, forcing Obito to phase through Fu. Torne's speed really shouldn't be underestimated. Even the anime depicts him actually doing battle with a KCM-1 Naruto clone during the war while suppressed, but that's the anime, so do what you will. Torne's bug poison was strong enough for Obito's Zetsu arm to straight up fall off, with it being lethal to Fu as well, all from a single touch, may I mind you. So close quarters combat taijutsu with Torne is obviously going to prove quite difficult for almost everybody in the summit. Obviously, most things I said about Fu can also be applied here. It's just that he's the superior. Next up, we have the Tobirama Slayer himself, Darui. No, okay, I'm just playing, but in all seriousness, Darui is pretty crazy. I mean, his spot shouldn't really surprise anyone. I mean, he does the best of like all the aids, being able to react and counter the initial 3 Tomoe Sasuke with both a water wall, then followed by his emotion wave lightning style. That actually, kind of shocked the heck out of Sasuke. He was able to totally intercept Suigetsu and Jugo at 2 different points, with even the right Kage stating sometime during the summit that with the loss of his arm, it really didn't matter because he has Darui by his side, his true right hand. During the summit, Darui also wasn't ever really pressed enough to bring forth the Black Lightning, and we know he had it at this point as it's talked about in past tense when it's shown against the Gold and Silver brothers, with the mark of the third Raikage being what symbolizes one having it, which Darui has during the summit on his shoulder. A tattoo that the third Raikage never allowed anyone else to have, speaking at the monster that Darui is. This shouldn't really be underestimated. Kinkaku saw it and literally noted that on the basis he has that tattoo, he could give them a good fight. These people literally killed a Hokage, which was pretty, this is probably an understatement, as Darui would then go on to completely evade their fire style, blitz Kinkaku by cutting his arm off whilst he was in mid-swing, may I mind you, Kinkaku being the stronger of the two brothers, and the databook also states that he mows down Ginkaku with an overwhelming amount of chakra. He also, of course, blitzed them both with Laser Circus, an attack that potentially pressed Sasuke Susanoo. So yeah, Darui isn't a joke by any metric, and is the peak of the aids. Moving on to our first actual Kage to be listed, and to nobody's surprise, it's Mei. Now, I want to say that Mei is actually pretty underrated, and has a case to be made that she could even be above Gaara if you really consider her war arc feats, but since I'm trying to only use the scaling chains that would be really applicable here, she probably does go behind him. If you really do want to include her war arc feats on the basis that she may not have actually gotten stronger, then please, by all means. Mei's best feats during the war is firing 2 water style jutsu prior to any of the Kage, and could react or whatever against Madara. And then the other Kage are very fatigued, by the way, during this moment, as they were far more active than Mei during the battle, so they could have just been more fatigued, which is consistent with her lava, potentially moving on par with the version 2 Raikage, which is probably disingenuous, or at least disingenuous to backscale it here, as Sasuke has a hard time perceiving V2A, much less combating it, which was not the case with the lava style. So a lot of her best showings are just out of context, which she does still have a lot of pressure that she was able to use and put on a stronger Sasuke than the one the Raikage battled, but Sasuke was injured. I will say though, he does get some chakra restoration from White Zetsu after he absorbs a lot of chakra from all the Kage. So this Sasuke is rather hard to place, but still should be around the level, or maybe even superior to the one that fought the Raikage, in which Sasuke never really goes on the offensive, but Mei can still pressure this Sasuke pretty hard, or at least harder than what anyone else prior to her could, with her being able to literally melt the Susanoo. And just off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure that the only people to ever melt it are literally Mei and Kaguya. So, yeah, that's with her corrosive mist, which, you know, nobody below her really has a counter for. She can kind of just fill up the room with it. Even someone like Suigetsu who can liquefy would still get burnt. Again, she also has the lava style, which is pretty crazy. So Mei is nuts, and may be the weakest Kage here, but is still very strong nonetheless. Next up, we do have the Kage Gaara, in which Gaara is pretty impressive, but just suffers from lack of showings. Now, I think his showings in relativity to the Raikage are better than how Mei stacks up to, you know, Sasuke, and how he stacks up to the Sasuke that fought A here, as Gaara has just much easier assertions, I guess. Now, his feats on the Raikage are quite over-exaggerated, and it's based on the feat where the version 2A performs a guillotine drop on Sasuke, where he jumps up and falls down while swinging his leg down on Sasuke's neck. However, Gaara intercepted that attack with his sand, you know, effectively saving Raikage A from getting Inton spikes up his ass. However, we also need to note a few other things about the attack, in which, you know, the defense, you know, and the sand that was used was Gaara's fastest form of attack, being his gourd sand. That's one thing Deidara catched on to pretty quickly. However, the Raikage's attack is nothing close to it. A just landed a successful lateral bolt of pain straight through the flame-covered Susanoo as he hit Sasuke in the neck. Then Sasuke is down on the ground, in which A has an easy win, or so he thought, with him now going for the final blow aimed straight for Sasuke's neck once again. The chapter synopsis statement even questions if this is the end for Sasuke and his hatred, and when A starts falling, Sasuke is able to move around, move his arm, you know, his arm to his eye. Then you'll notice how the flames are going out. He ignites more flames and then shapes them into a spike shield. This is many reactions which just weren't seen in any other attack whilst Abe was in V2. The lateral bolt of pain was only reacted to by Sasuke by thinking to light flames on the Susanoo and angling his head as A hit him. So off the basis that Sasuke could react far easier here, this is a more strength-focused final blow. The guillotine drop is just slower than either the elbow bolt or the lateral bolt of pain. Therefore, while Gaara can perceive and react to the Raikage, it's a slower Raikage in V2. Gaara's absolute defense left by Shukaku can also block the Enton, which is not the Enton Kagetsuchi. It's probably just the flames or Amaterasu that's being fired, as that's kind of how it looks. However, I don't really think this is genuine either. You know, again, Sasuke's not forming them into anything, as like he could just form them in a spike next to Gaara's throat. He's immediately just removing them also, so yeah, it's more that the sand is intercepting the travel speed of the flames, which V2A also dodged. Gaara's sand does have its limits in speed though, as shown when Deidara, one of the Akatsuki members, was weaving around all of it with his flight speed without much trouble and ignoring the bombs. And, you know, the aerodynamic birds without much trouble whilst holding back, they were also just able to kind of fly through it all. This would be the same Deidara who is relative to Oniki in flight speed. Maybe one of Oniki's slower speeds, but yeah, Gaara shouldn't really be a contender for a top Kage or anything like that, or at least by this point. By his assertions in relativity to Sasuke and A, they are still just easier than anyone else we have so far. Gaara should still be able to fight that Sasuke and perform well, just not as well as A or Oniki or anyone like that. Maybe you could argue that since he can intercept it, he could, you know, just sand coffin them and catch them lacking, but I guess that doesn't matter, as both A and Sasuke are willing to sacrifice body parts for a victory. His sand was also able to mold into bullets and move alongside Darwee's laser circus, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, that's basically it for Gaara, who is coming in at a hot 6th place. Breaking into the top 5, we have a benchmark character we've used for a while, and that is the Raikage A. Now, I mean, there is a lot to say in regards to the Raikage. Firstly, I want to say that Raikage scaling to KCM1 Naruto in this arc is pretty contentious. The reason as to why this is that A in the war, and honestly as a character, has been set as a narrative benchmark for speed for so many characters. I would actually argue that he has become overlooked in his true power. During the war, A, whilst only in his version 1 cloak, is able to perfectly match and equal KCM1 Naruto to the point where Naruto was going to use clones to likely divert A as he usually does in character if he is weaker or slower. This is after seeing him one time, may I mind you. Naruto then notices A's lack of attention and states, "Now's my chance," and moves at full speed once again, and A just intercepts him whilst only in his version 1 cloak. With the only time A ever goes into V2, Naruto reacts with body flicker point blank after A covered a substantial distance. And this is also an A trying to literally test Naruto's speed to see if he'll just let him go. So, in regard to combat speed, or potentially even reaction speed, A is faster than KCM1 Naruto, arguably in his version 1 cloak during the war. So, now, well, you might be saying, well, Virtue, shouldn't he be higher then? In which, let's look at what V1 Raikage did during this summit to make this consistent, in which you'll notice that A in V1 was being reacted to by a base Sharingan Sasuke, with him going into version 2 after seeing the MS, alluding to that A was unconfident in fighting MS Sasuke without V2, so A likely had to train for that increase, and the 4 databook profiles actually does state that, quote, "As the Raikage, he leads a busy life, but whenever he has free time, he trains his muscles. His strong body is a result of that," end quote. With him being shown to train on screen, lifting weights and what have you, maybe you could also say that his battles with Sasuke made him stronger, as fighting does. He did lose an arm, which could result in loss of chakra and hence speed, but considering this is contradiction, I would just say that the best explanation would be that where he cut it off in the arm, A's chakra ratio was leaning less in physical energies and was just more spiritual or mental areas. With the arm being gone, he would also lose some mass, which is shown to obviously make you faster. But yeah, there are many explanations to this concept, but the Raikage is still superior to Sasuke, with him overwhelming MS Sasuke whilst fresh, as showing on MS Sasuke so much better than either Gaara or Mei. This is an A suppressing himself for a large portion of the fight, as the chapter synopsis statement and Karin both note that A is super impressive, and he's kind of holding back, and I don't really think anyone should argue against that. His raw physical power would kind of just maul virtually anyone below him, with his V1 cloak alone, you know, only ever really being penetrated by a Chidori, which one thing to note about that is the smaller the Chidori is, as noted by Chidori Senbon in the data book, the faster it is, and the one that pierced the Raikage was ridiculously large, so maybe it was more AP focused of a Chidori, but that's more conjecture. The one negative downside to A though, in ranking him, is that we can't justify him to be around his war arc self, but also we can't justify him scaling to a stronger Sasuke, who actually does get many amps throughout the series, and when I'll get to where he appears, I'll go over those, so it's just justifying him any higher is baseless. If maybe you think that he should just be in a higher echelon, then by all means, maybe place him a bit higher. But for this, using the empirical evidence, A is at the 5th spot. Now, before we move to the 4th spot, I need to talk about an argument I know I'll hear. Somebody in the comments will probably note that, well, see, a Sensor Ninja states that the Raikage has speed or nerve transmissions on par with Konoha's Yellow Flash, meaning that he could best Obito, right? In which this just isn't true. For one, Minato is vastly above Obito even while fatigued. However, this is a Hokage Minato, a version of Minato greater than his Jonin counterpart. We know this as the 4 data book states that the Raikage boasts a godlike speed not inferior to the Yellow Flash, meaning that V2A is either greater or equals to Jonin Minato. However, for Hokage Minato's section, he's stated to be the greatest in godlike speed, just straight up saying that Minato is greater than both A and his Jonin self, with the chapter synopsis statements corroborating this. Also, C just doesn't know what he's talking about. He states himself in the 4th war that it was his first ever war. He's kind of just making a baseless claim. So yeah, A is not beating Obito. Now, next up, we have Danzo Shimura, and while it may seem weird him being above Raikage A, this plays off what I said previously, that Danzo objectively scales to a stronger Sasuke than the one the Raikage justifiably could. Danzo, with the aid of his Sharingan, Sasuke is able to turn and react to the Raikage, as well as alter his Enton shape to combat the Raikage, who was in version 2. Sasuke then, with several amps later, was being compared to and battled with Danzo being able to react and combat him, even trying to to off-guard him many times with the Izanagi, such as him getting hit by a Amaterasu so he can then blitz Sasuke with his Futon air bullets, as well as him grabbing Sasuke's throat and placing the curse seal before he could slice him. Now, that's just not all, but, even once Sasuke, he got so much different that he was implied to be totally different and powered, with his Susanoo amping his hatred growing. Danzo was still able to land attacks with his vacuum bullets. Danzo was also capable of completely blasting out the back of the Susanoo. Even in combat speed, Danzo's wind style was able to pierce Sasuke with them moving at the same speed and piercing each other at the same time, as the chapter synopsis states. So I think it's fair to say that no matter what angle you take, Danzo is relative to this stronger Sasuke in at least speed and AP, this meaning that Danzo scales to a stronger Sasuke than what anyone else could or anyone else so far has. So I think it's pretty fair to say that physically Danzo is pretty powerful, being placed at the 4th strongest spot. Danzo also does have access to the Baku, his giant elephant chimera summon, large enough to dwarf even Sasuke's V3 Susanoo, with his wind style also being ridiculously potent, scaling above even both Sasuke and his V3 Susanoo. Finally, our main protagonist of the arc, Sasuke Uchiha, coming in at 3rd, cracking the top places. Sasuke Uchiha throughout the summit grows in power exponentially. Many people are, now much more accepting to the idea of this. However, many people still either just don't know the extent at which he does, or if he actually does get stronger at all. But before this, we need to understand a few basic things about chakra. Chakra is not a one-for-one energy. It is a unique chakra and entity in many ways, not just in a quantitative state, but also in a qualitative state, possessing many properties, such as Madara and Kushina being stated to both possess a particularly powerful chakra. We also have Kisame outright stating that Samehada is attracted to B's amount and quality of chakra. The most important statement, though, is one that Fukasaku states while teaching Naruto about the fundamentals in chakra, in which he practically states that since they are adding the nature energy to your chakra wheel, it actually results in a more powerful chakra, leading to a real boost in ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu, meaning that the more powerful Sasuke's chakra becomes, the stronger and faster he also becomes. Tobirama, in being asked about the Uchiha clan, comes to explain the phenomena of the Sharingan, and states that the Sharingan taps into the power of that person's heart, rapidly increasing his or her strength along with the power of their hate. Following a bit after that, he then states, the deeper the darkness gets, the greater the ocular powers go, and all the way until the person becomes practically unstoppable. This is all, essentially meaning that the colder and darker his chakra is, the more his heart becomes dark, and his Sharingan will develop even further, making his power far greater. This is extremely important for Sasuke, as he gets 4 massive amps due to his hatred. The first amp is a base Sharingan Sasuke cutting down the samurai, in which Karin, a top century ninja, states that, quote, Sasuke's chakra is changed. He's not even the same Sasuke as before. I can't believe it's thicker than how he was in the second curse mark state, and it's even colder. End quote. This obviously just straight up means that Sasuke's chakra is now much more dense and cold. He is not even the same Sasuke that fought Killer B. Then, whilst fighting the Raikage, Obito notes that Sasuke's hatred is his strongest weapon and greatest ally, just helping further solidify him gaining an actual increase in power. Then, Sasuke obtains the version 2 Susanoo, or the skeletal Susanoo, still trying to progress to the muscular Susanoo, in which Karin then states, it's so different, it's so cold, talking about how his hatred is increasing from gaining more power from the Susanoo with it evolving, which this is a common theme. When Sasuke's chakra changes, his Susanoo evolves and gets much stronger as well, sort of adding to the coldness, also increasing power and evolving the Susanoo, which in turn makes his hatred greater, creating a loop of amps for Sasuke. However, following the Gaara encounter, Sasuke is pretty fatigued and drops to the floor against Mei, and Kari notes Sasuke's chakra has gone weak, just again confirming it is power related, but then White Setsu comes and siphons off most of the Kage's chakra and gives it all to Sasuke, practically completely rejuvenating him for the Danzo fight. Then Sasuke enters the Danzo fight and clashes many blows with him, allowing his rage to boil to a point where Sasuke obtains the muscular Susanoo with his crossbow being equipped, and now this hatred and Susanoo evolution is probably the strongest amp he actually gets during the summit, as Karin questions if this Sasuke is even Sasuke Sasuke at all, saying that Sasuke is nearly a completely different person than he was before, with Obito himself also making note that Sasuke's rage has matured and he's gained power and his body is merely responding to it. Then, his last and final amp is against Kakashi when Sasuke feels that the Konoha Shinobi are laughing in Itachi's face, laughing at what he stood for. And then his Susanoo evolves to the complete Susanoo, or the one that's totally covered in a separate set of armor, the one both Itachi and EMS Sasuke have, in which Karin then notes he's even colder. So, yeah, if it isn't clear, Sasuke's amps are no joke. Of course, there are other things we didn't mention, like how Sasuke was rejuvenated, or right after he was rejuvenated. He could have also gotten stronger from all the fighting he just did, and, because that's kind of what B also alludes to what makes you stronger. This is, what I meant when I was comparing Danzo and Raikage A. This would mean that based on what we know, there is a very good chance that Sasuke would have beat the Raikage if he were to be returned to that room during his fight with Danzo. Now, we know that Sasuke has gotten physically faster and more powerful, but we also have to talk about his new arsenal. Sasuke now possesses the ability of the Susanoo arrow, an ability that's a total blitz level above his own combat speed, as shown when Danzo was able to keep up with Sasuke, but then got utterly blitzed by the arrow itself. Same for Kakashi, who had to use his perception to save himself. Sasuke still has the Enton Kagetsuchi, which is very crucial in many bouts like this, where Sasuke can just have the ultimate weapon. So, yeah, Sasuke is coming in comfortably at 3rd place. Yeah, Old Man Inoki is placed in 2nd, and I've always been an advocate for Oniki being the strongest Kage. While mostly Kage can't really scale to the Warark variants, Oniki can, as Oniki is very old and is implied to get weaker with time, obviously, just meaning that Oniki in the summit is probably equals or even stronger than the Warark Inoki, in which that just means that Inoki still has the feat of holding an entire Tengai Shinsei, and, as well as him being able to react perfectly to a stronger version to Lightened Raikage. For Oniki to completely amp his speed and then make it, heavier for him to hit harder, he has to react to the Raikage and, time everything perfectly, placing his reaction speed for the weighted boulder jutsu and probably particle style as well, exponentially greater than the version to Raikage here, and hence practically anybody else in the summit. As none of them could really counter it, he quite literally could just force everyone to their knees and then particle style. Oniki is also much more aggressive during the summit, as he hasn't really been resolved to be a good person or whatever yet. So Oniki probably would do this in character, to be honest, but particle style just negs any ability thus far, as it does destroy things on a molecular level, and his speed is relative to the V2 Lightened A, who's stronger in the war. I mean, what else is there to say here? Now, to absolutely nobody's surprise at all, Obito Uchiha is the strongest character in the Summit arc. I don't really think there's much to say. Obito is implied to be KCM2 level by both Minato and the entire narrative of Naruto having to master the Nine Tails to beat the Masked Man, which he does obtain KCM2 when that's all stated. Naruto is immediately also stated comparable to Minato, a character who Obito fought whilst he gets KCM2. So I think it's pretty consistent to say that what does anybody here have to get around Kamui? So I hate to be that guy, but Obito just outstats every single character here. Has Genjutsu that would just slaughter them all. Has Izanagi, and just in case he ever got off-guarded by something. So to nobody's surprise, Obito is number 1. With that being said, I just want to say thank you for watching this far, and I mean, you watched this far, so if you're not subscribed, please do so, as I post a lot of great content similar to this, and I hope you may be able to learn something, or maybe you just like to chill out and listen to some dude talk about Naruto. But yeah, as always, love you guys.